in the audience have read Moneyball or seen the movie? Almost everybody. Loved both. Unbelievable. Billy was the first person that I was aware of in professional sports to take data analytics to the next level. Our founding team, Eric Swan and Rob Doss, had a couple of tenets. One of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to do something extremely hard around stuff that other people thought was garbage, that they were ignoring, which in this case was logs. Billy took that same approach. Something really hard, how do you mash up a ton of statistics that other people were ignoring? It was available, and use it as a competitive advantage. As most of us would know him as the manager and now executive vice president of the Oakland A's. He actually was a professional baseball player before that, so he knew what he was doing from the ground up. During his tenure at the A's, it's been an incredible run. 4 playoff appearances, first team in the history of baseball to win 20 consecutive games. Data is the foundation of what made this possible, and hopefully as he presents, you'll start to see the correlations between how MLB and Splunk or other organizations can help you continue to define your landscape. So I think we're going to roll a video and then have Billy Beane on stage. Thank you for your time and for continuing to give us feedback. If we could please roll a video.
There are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
That's $1, man.
What?
Welcome to Oakland.
I need more money.
We're not New York. Find players with the money that we do have.
I like Perez.
Got an ugly girlfriend. Ugly girlfriend means no confidence.
You guys are talking the same old nonsense like we're looking for Fabio. We got to think differently.
Who's Fabio?
Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. And in order to buy wins, you need to buy runs.
Who are you?
I'm Peter Brand.
First job in baseball?
It's my first job anywhere.
We're gonna shake things up. Why don't you walk me through the board?
I believe there's a championship team that we can afford because everyone else undervalues them, like an island of misfit toys.
We want you at first base. I've only ever played catcher. It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, watch.
It's incredibly hard.
He can't throw. But what can he do?
You want me to speak?
What up when you get?
He gets on base.
We are card counters at the blackjack table. We're gonna turn the odds on the casino. I'm heading in. Text me the play-by-play.
Wait, what?
I don't watch the games.
Billy Beane has tried to reinvent a system that's been working for years. There was a nice theory, just not working out.
How long is Billy Beane gonna last?
He's proven himself right out of a job.
In their minds, it's threatening the game. It's threatening the way that they do things.
Hey, Daddy, do you think you'll lose your job?
What? Where did you hear that?
Well, I go on the internet sometimes.
Don't go on the internet. Watch TV or talk to people.
You're discounting what scouts have done for 150 years?
What the hell am I doing?
What is happening in Oakland? It defies everything we know about baseball.
Just plain crazy!
If we win this team, we'll change the game. This better work. I'm just kidding.
Good morning. Go and get your groans out of the way and say, like, Brad Pitt played this guy, all right? Trust me, a cocktail hour, I'll look way better. I'm going to spend, I saw the hands that read the book, which is actually pretty impressive. I assume a lot of you have seen the movie. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about that because it's kind of the elephant in the room. It's a little surreal experience. In 2003, the book Moneyball was released. It became a bestseller. And Sony immediately optioned the movie rights. Now, I really wasn't that excited about having a movie made. The book was enough for me. Because as you can imagine, when somebody says they're going to make a movie about yourself and your company, you're kind of holding your breath as to who's going to play you. You know, is it going to be Bruce Dern or, you know, somebody like that? You know, because I knew where it was going to go with that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but in 2008, Christopher Walken maybe. So in 2008, I got a call. It was about 5 years after the book came out from a writer here in the area. He said, "Hey, they just cast Brad Pitt to play you in the movie. And I exhaled, and I didn't really want to be digging myself too much, so I wanted to say something self-deprecating. So I said, I said, what do you think about this? I said, that's great. It's better than having Zero Mostel play me. Exactly. Only people over the age of 60 know who Zero Mostel is, so it really wasn't very funny. And then I was on the Dan Patrick show, first question on it. Hey, what's it like? Brad Pitt's going to play you. So I tried to think of somebody else that was hopefully a little funnier and somebody that people actually knew. And I said, it's better than having Marty Feldman play me. Same issue, but I dropped the demographic to 50. Finally, you still get the question, what's it like and what's he like? And the one thing I do take the opportunity, he's a wonderful, wonderful person. Smart, intuitive. I was just amazed at the people who made the movie. When you're at the top of your field, how really good they are at what they do. And one of the things I also realized, this guy's an international celebrity. When you are walking with him, the looks that people give him, it's unbelievable. But I realized that it really isn't people like him who change when they become famous. It's how people treat them. And Brad's from Missouri, and it's Brad to me and Brad Pitt to you guys, because I know him. And you guys don't. I found out firsthand the first day. I live in Danville, East Bay. Oh. The whole season ticket base for the A's is here today, by the way. So that's not that funny. So first day that Brad's come to the house, I've got 3 children. My oldest, Casey, is the one in the movie, and I have 2 younger children. We have a wonderful, long-time nanny, Sasha, who is from Berkeley, and real sweetheart. And every day that she come to take care of the kids, she had cut-off jeans, Birkenstocks on, tank top, every single day. So the day that Brad's come to the house, Sasha shows up in a prom dress. And Sasha, what's up with that? She goes, oh, nothing, just a normal day. And I'm an early riser. I usually get up about 5:15, and I get up at 5:15, and there's my wife, Tara, blow drying her hair in the mirror. She hasn't been up before the crack of noon our entire marriage. And she's blow drying her hair. Well, honey, what's that? Oh, nothing, just a normal day. Yeah, Brad's coming to the house. So, but anyways, for my own family, the reaction, but again, amazing, really, really neat person. And when they were filming the movie, at the time, him and his family were all out. They always stayed together as a family. And to have a barbecue with Brad and AJ, it's AJ to me too, Angelina Jolie to you guys. Pretty surreal being in Danville barbecuing with them, and they had 2 of their children. But again, just marvelous people. And it was a great experience. Again, I'm glad it's over, because I do have a day job. And the last thing on the movie, about 1.5 years ago, a woman came up to me and she goes, I saw the movie, I know nothing about baseball. It's a great story, but what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm doing exactly the same thing now that I was doing in the movie. I'm doing the exact same job. That's still what my days are like. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, you poor thing, you haven't gotten a promotion yet, right? Because literally I'm doing the same exact thing. So, but anyways, I want to talk a little bit about my day job. I run the Oakland A's, the baseball operations side. I love working for the A's. I've stayed my entire baseball career as an executive here. We have a tremendous amount of challenges. There's 30 baseball teams. The revenues and the potential revenues for all are not equal, which also is somewhat of an advantage. It creates an opportunity for us. And again, I want to tell you a little about the story. It's one of the questions I always get is sort of, how did you come about thinking the way you did? And a lot of it was my own experience. And first of all, I know everybody's a baseball fan in here, or in the room. Nobody's laughing. So those were my career statistics as a Major League Baseball player. It's chapter 11 if you're a baseball player. So why I put that up there is because in June of 1980, that's when I came out of high school, I was one of the top high school players rated in the country. Why? 6'4", 185 pounds, ran like a 4.5 40, had a great vertical jump, looked really good in a baseball uniform, and I was the homecoming king at Mount Carmel High School. All things that mean nothing when it comes to being a Major League Baseball player. But I looked like a player, a baseball player. Now, proud of the fact that I played 10 years professionally, parts of 6 in the major leagues, but the fact of the matter is I was not the second best player in that draft. In fact, what they're looking at, I was probably better designed to go play football somewhere than I was to play baseball. But in fact, the number 1 player that year was a young man named Darryl Strawberry. Yeah, you've actually heard of him, right? I was an overvalued asset. Why? Because I looked the part. And sports is very emotional. It's sort of intuitive. That's one of the reasons we like sports, because we like the emotion. The most rational people during the week become completely irrational when it comes to cheering for their favorite sports team. And in some sense, that's how we made decisions. In fact, does anyone go to an SEC school here? I know no one graduates from the SEC, but I'm sorry? He went to Florida. He wouldn't go to a good football school. All right, now we're talking, right? So we want to get the emotional part, right? Rational businessman during the week, and then you paint your face scarlet and gold on Saturdays, right? Well, that's what we love about sports. It's the greatest sports conference in the world, and that's one of the reasons we love it. I'm going to get to that in a second, explain why I don't watch the games. So again, that's what we love about sports, but as a business, that's how we are also making decisions. So my own career and the fact that I was an overvalued asset really had an impact when I stopped playing. And give you a little business background. In 1992, the A's were one of the highest paying teams in Major League Baseball. This is what we spent on players. There was a direct correlation between how much you spent on players and winning baseball games. You spent a lot. You won a lot of games. But we were also a business that was losing $15 million a year, which really isn't a business. It's a public park that your owners donated to. We were quickly sold in the mid-90s. And the gap between the have and the have-nots for the big markets really started to happen in the 90s when teams created their own local cable networks. They got to keep the revenues. They didn't have to share with the rest of the league. So the sort of small market, large market term that you hear now was really starting to happen in the mid-90s, and this is when I entered the front office. To give you an idea how far it's come and our challenges. In 2015, the Dodgers spent nearly $300 million on players. The A's spent 84. Now, the first thing we did in Oakland was start running a proper business, making sure we weren't spending more than we were bringing in. In 2016, $250 million. So this is what we're up against on a daily basis. And the one thing about sports, people don't cheer for competitive teams. And if we play the New York Yankees in an exciting game, we get beat in the ninth inning and we lose 4-3, we don't get partial credit for making the game close. It's zero sum. You win, you lose. So for us, it was not only a matter of trying to compete, it was a matter of finding a way to win. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the book and explain this slide, because one of the questions we get, the book came out in 2003, it was written by Michael Lewis. And the question is, why would you let Michael Lewis sit in your office for an entire year and document how you are doing business when in fact you've created an advantage over your competitors? Before I do, I'm going to talk about the best business decision I ever made. When I was looking for an assistant general manager, I spent a year and a half. Most guys who are running baseball teams are guys like myself, ex-player, came up in the business, and he ran the business. It was very incestuous the way we hired. We didn't hire from outside. Now, I played 10 years professionally, took a couple of econ classes at UC San Diego, which qualifies me to run a billion-dollar business, right? And the other thing we sort of had the original business metric, original business data really was in baseball. We had statistics going back for 150 years that actually meant something. Guys like Bill James, Pete Palmer, Earnshaw Cook have been writing for years. There's a rational, mathematical way to put together a baseball team based on statistics. But because they were outside the industry, because they didn't play the game, people ignored them. And I was reading some of this stuff when I was finished playing, and again, it all made sense to me. Putting together a baseball team was really a game of probability. And so I spent a year and a half looking for the right assistant general manager. And I finally hired a young man named Paul DePodesta. In the movie, Jonah Hill played a homogenized version of him. In real life, Paul was a 24-year-old Harvard econ graduate or major. His normal career path would have been to go to Harvard, go work at Goldman Sachs, business school, start his own hedge fund, private equity. That's his normal career path, but Paul loved sports. And I needed somebody, quite frankly, to make sense of all this data in the form of statistics. Somebody who enjoyed running regression models at the breakfast table like Paul did. Now, Paul loved sports. He didn't play sports. I mean, he played freshman football at Harvard, but that didn't really count, does it? But he loved baseball. And in fact, when I hired him, I got these letters. How can you hire this Harvard econ major to help you evaluate players? You need to hire someone, this ex-player who's got the eye for talent. That was always it, this certain gift to be able to predict the future of young players, which didn't make sense to me. I needed somebody rational, somebody to make sense of all this data. So I hired Paul. Back to Michael. 2000, 2, I get a call. Say, this is Michael Lewis of the New York Times. I'd like to write a New York Times business section article on how the A's are competing against larger market teams. We had made the playoffs a couple of years in a row. We're kind of a cute little local story, but it's sort of perceived as an aberration, and we're just going to go away. And I didn't actually make the connection. This is the same Michael Lewis that had written Liar's Poker in 1989. I just thought he was a writer. Says, I'll meet with you for 15 minutes, and I figured I was going to slough him off on Paul and get rid of him. So Michael meets me and Paul down in Arizona. He sits down, and within 2 minutes, he says, I know exactly what you're doing here in Oakland. You're mispricing, or excuse me, you're arbitraging the mispricing of baseball players. He was exactly right. In some sense, Michael was validating what we were doing. And like every great leader, I like to be validated, so I let him keep coming back day after day. The other thing was Michael worked on Wall Street in a very crude way. We were trying to mimic what was going on Wall Street with some of the quantitative hedge funds in a very, very crude way. We figured they had one goal, to make as much money as fast as they can without emotion. And we wanted to do the same thing in putting our team together using baseball statistics with, in acquiring baseball players. So we felt like we were learning something from him. And Michael became one of the guys. And about 6 weeks into the season, he's with us every day. And again, it's like me, Paul, and Michael. I said, hey, Michael, when are you going to write this business section article in the New York Times? And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, guys. I need a little more space. I think I'm going to write a Sunday Times Magazine piece. I need, this is a little more interesting than I thought. So me and Paul started getting a little worried, because Michael had been with us every minute. And we were a little concerned about if we said the wrong thing and it came out. There's only 20 and other owners. We could get fired and really have no place to work. Paul would have been fine. He would have gone to Wall Street and made 4 times what I was paying. I would have been selling cars from Cal Worthington in Long Beach, right? That's a local joke for the Southern California guys. But then I said, Paul, don't worry about it. Nobody in baseball reads the New York Times. We're fine, right? Don't worry about it. No one's going to read this. So anyways, August finally comes around, the season 2/3 of the way over. I said, Michael, when's this New York Times Magazine piece going to come out? He goes, I forgot to tell you guys, I'm going to write a book. My stomach came through my throat. Michael spent the whole offseason writing the book. And a year to the day that we met him, we were both, me and Paul, back in Arizona. He called me and he said, the book is done and I'm going to send you and Paul both a copy of The Galley so you can read it before it comes out. But understand, you cannot change one word in it. I just want you to be able to see it. So he overnights the copies, I get mine, Paul gets his, I read mine in 4 hours, Paul reads his in 2. And I walk in his office, I'm beat red. And if you've read the book or seen the movie, you can picture that. And Paul's as white as a ghost. And I said, Paul, did you read this? And he goes, yeah. And I said, am I that much of a maniac in the office? And he looks at me and he said, am I that much of a geek, right? Because Paul was supposedly running around with a computer and I was just Rambo. Well, the fact is I'm a little bit of a geek and Paul's a little bit of a maniac. And we hugged each other and had this Leo Buscaglia hug moment. And we called Michael. We said, Michael, we just read your book. Nobody is going to read this. I said, who cares about the Oakland A's? I said, we're not even the most popular team in our own town. Right? Again, not that funny. I said, this is going to be in the nice price at Barnes & Noble in a month. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to read this, right? We were convinced nobody was going to read the book. And he goes, no, I think you're wrong. And he said 3 things. He said, number one, people on Wall Street are going to read it. He said, people trying to change traditional business cultures are going to like this book. And he said something that's probably an overused, ubiquitous term today, but it certainly wasn't then. He says people working with big data are going to like this book. And he was exactly right, and has gone on to sell whatever the movie was made. So that's how the book was made. We didn't actually agree to do it. Michael, the reason the book was made is Michael Lewis is a sneaky son of a gun. But that's that. But the other thing was we gave away no secrets. Everything in the book was public information. Anybody on the internet could have done the same thing. Any 15-year-old. Bill James had been writing about it for years. Nothing was proprietary. It was public information. It was out there for years. And again, that's what the book was about. So we didn't feel like we were giving anything away. But during this entire time, the one advantage we did have is we were collecting data, raw data. And we were hiring a lot of really bright people like Paul to make sense of this data, hopefully someday. So the book comes out in 2003. On-base percentage is the highest paid skill in baseball, or excuse me, the 8th highest paid skill in baseball at the time. By the time the book came out a year later, it was the highest paid skill. We were properly pricing baseball players' skills. In fact, the movie was about what we did was we took advantage of the fact that we had a small amount of chips and we said, we're going to invest in the most important skill a player has. And that was on base percentage, strongest correlation to winning games. But people weren't paying for it.
We took it all and hired a bunch of players who did that one thing. And if you think about on-base percentage, if you're not a baseball fan, it's a skill. It's not necessarily an athletic movement. Guys who are good at it take walks, and eventually many of them hit homers. You don't have to necessarily be a great athlete, but you do have to have the skill. In fact, as you remember, Matt Stairs is one of my all-time favorite A's. For those of you who don't know, about 5'9", 240 pounds. Did not look good in a baseball uniform. Didn't look good out of it either, I saw. But Matt did the most important thing a baseball player could do. We signed at the age of 26 years old for $5,000 a month. He played with Boston, Montreal, and Japan. And was judged because he didn't look like an athlete. Because he, 5'9", 240, how can you be a professional athlete? But when you actually looked at what he did and didn't judge him by, say, what you thought a classic athlete would look like, he did exactly what you wanted him to do. Matt went on to hit 37 homers and drive in 100 runs for us. The cost of that production day is about $20 million a year. And he was out there because people didn't want to sign him because of the way he looked. In fact, we had a whole team full of guys like that, guys who got on base and hit homers. So we were able to put together a team cheaply. We were essentially a slow-pitch softball team. In fact, we had mullets too. That's really what the book was about. Now, any public or advantage where the information is public is not going to last very long. In fact, the game changed really rapidly. 2004, John Henry purchased the Boston Red Sox, hires a young man named Theo Epstein, went to Yale, didn't come up as an athlete, a very bright guy who wanted to get into sports similar to Paul. He hires Theo. Boston, the Yankees in 2004 had the two highest on-base percentage teams in the league. They played in the ALCS. They also had the two highest runs scored. They also had the two highest payrolls. So on-base percentage went from 8 to 1 in 1 year, just on the book. They played in the ALCS in 2004. Boston won, and they went on to win their first championship since the Revolutionary War. So this advantage we had, or this inefficiency, was quickly gone in a year. Again, that's really what the book was about in the movie. So we gave away nothing public. So for us, we had to go back to the drawing board. What advantage did we have now? Well, the advantage was we were collecting data. Everything that happened on a baseball field, we were collecting it. And again, hiring really bright people to make sense of it. Some of it meant something, some of it meant nothing. But having a head start on the data gave us a big advantage. I'm going to explain that to you. Who's our big baseball fans? Someone in the front row. You are. Who's your team? Other than the A's. Mets. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, I was your favorite player when I was there, right? For a month. She's a Mets fan. It's a good time to be a Mets fan. My old mentor, my boss, Sam Yellish, run it. So you're Mets. You get to go to a lot of games, and you're sitting there, and let's think of David Wright, great Met, all-time Met, great. You've seen him play for a decade. Comes to the plate, and they're playing Anaheim Angels or LA Angels in an interleague game. David Wright, you're sitting behind the plate, hits a screaming line drive into the right center field gap. In fact, your internal database tells you that a ball at that velocity, that trajectory, that part of the field the last 10 years, at 97% of the time, it's been a double, because you know that because your internal database. Mike Trout makes a diving catch. In fact, it's a catch that only 3% of center fielders the last 20 years have made. And the pitcher at the time, Jared Weaver with the Angels, raises his hands because what has happened is his ERA has come down, a traditional stat. Mike Trout gets no credit for doing something only 3% of the center fielders have done. And David Wright gets penalized by having his batting average go down, despite the fact that that process, 97% of the time, would have resulted in a double. He gets penalized. So with teams now using statistics, which was the result, we wanted to measure process, feeling that that was a better predictor of player performance. So there was a gap between statistics and the process. That was the proprietary information we were able to create with our raw data. And that's all I'm going to tell you, otherwise you'd buy your own baseball team. Actually, that's not true. What's interesting is that if you follow baseball now, this has been probably the greatest, I shouldn't say equalizer, but MLB is now releasing this information as raw data to every team for free, which makes it now really challenging. Because this is now information that teams with a lot of money can hire a lot of really bright people, so there's no sort of data advantage anymore if you're the one collecting it. That's just happened recently in the last couple of years. And there it is in a bullet point. I'm going to quickly get through this because they're going to run out of time here, but I'm going to go back to the draft and talk about, again, the culture. we'd always made decisions sort of based on our gut. We picked baseball players, tried to predict the future of baseball players, 17, 18-year-old kids, just sort of by looking at them for an hour playing the game. Does anyone remember Bob Feller? This is Bob Feller is one of the greatest pitchers in the history. Do you have any tribe hat on? Is that an Indian's hat? Nice. Bob Feller is one of the greatest pitchers in the history of the game. Signed as a 17-year-old farm boy, like in the 20s, scout season, throws like 100 miles an hour, comes to the big city, goes out to be a Hall of Famer. It's a great story. 17-year-old farm boy, Hall of Famer. It's happened like once. But as an industry, we kept investing in that romance. We wanted that small town kid to become a Hall of Famer. In fact, we've been drafting players since 1965. At that time, 100 players for every team. And only the average number of players that would get to the major leagues out of each draft was like 3 to 5. And it never really changed, right? This made no sense to me. It seemed, I mean, we had no process. Every year we were making decisions in a vacuum. We weren't using any information. We were just looking at a kid and trying to predict it. And the results never changed. So we brought Paul into this environment. We said, you know what? Let's run a draft based only on data and information. And now that we actually draft 50, but it was a little more when we first started this, we said, no matter what we do, I said, if we run a draft based strictly on data and not on what we see and eliminate the emotion from it, I said, even we can blindfold a seal and have him honk horns and we get 3 out of 5 out of 100. Pure randomness will give us that. But if we do create an objective process and we're able to, say, get 6 players out of a draft over a 5-year period, that's 5 extra major league players at the cost of a rookie. That's a huge advantage to us. So let's experiment and do one draft and eliminate our eyes and look strictly at information. Now, this didn't go over real well because it's not romantic. Because again, everything in baseball is about the romance. Every baseball movie is romantic. Think about every baseball movie you see, it's romantic. And again, as a business, we bought into that a little bit. So when you bring Paul in fact, when he came into the room, the draft room, it was very similar to that environment you saw in the clip. He brought in a computer, and somebody said, like, what are you going to do with that thing? That was sort of the response you got. Now, the other thing, too, is bringing in Paul to a bunch of guys like me, ex-baseball players. We weren't Harvard econ graduates, and we didn't run regression models for fun. So say, Paul, listen, we're going to run a draft based only on objective information, but I need you to give us bullet point information. We need to understand what you're talking about, right? We need you to dumb down, right? Paul said, no problem. Again, this was the culture that he was coming into. So one of the first things he said, guys, we've been drafting players at a 50-50 rate. College and high school 50-50, despite the fact that evidence shows that college players have twice the chance of getting to the major leagues. Again, just simple data that Paul had presented. Right? Why weren't we doing this? It wasn't that college players were better. We just made better decisions on them because we saw them more often. So it's all right, guys, we're taking all college players. Again, that stripped the romance from finding a 17-year-old kid in a small town. The other thing was college kids got to the major leagues quicker. You got a quicker return on your investment. All right, guys, we're taking all college kids. Now, this is where sort of the classic cultures came in, and bringing in a guy like Paul with the challenges, you can see some of the challenges. One of the other pieces of information Paul had, and he told us, he said, listen, guys, I've studied the draft, and in the last 10 years, there's not one high school position player drafted in the first round who's playing every day in the big leagues who comes from a state with less than 18 electoral votes. You guys got it quicker than I did. I'm looking. That was Paul dumbing down, by the way. He made it simple for us. What he was saying was that at that time, a high school kid, a bigger predictor of his major league success was where he grew up. The demographics played a greater role. A 5'6" kid from Los Angeles, California, no matter what you saw, had a greater chance than a 6'4" speedster from Spencer, Iowa, no matter how far you saw him hit the ball. Why? Because a kid from LA, Atlanta, Dallas, had gone through the competition. By the time he reached that senior year, he had competed against very good players. Okay, now that's not the case now. If you have young kids now, if you're from New Hampshire, you're playing travel teams, and you're getting a chance to play against some of the kids from the Sun Belt states. But back then, that wasn't the case. It was pure demographics that were the indicator. So this complete experiment in this draft based only on data, whereas before every decision had been made with our eyes and our gut, yielded 13 major league players. Right now, some of that was a bit of an aberration. In fact, if you happen to follow the A's, Nick Swisher just retired last year. Joe Bland's actually still pitching right now, but you also notice none of these players are actually still with the A's. We're a little bit like the boy band Menudo. When you're 13, we got to kick you out. But for us, when it reaches a certain level of pay, because we essentially are trying to run a good business, we have to move you, make sure we get assets in return. And again, more importantly, it wasn't that this individual draft was so good, it's just that we had now created an objective process. And now we actually have a blend of the subjective and the objective, because there is a benefit of the human opinion. It's a data point, and it is baked into the models that we run. It's just, we try and get as many as we can to create a wisdom of the crowds type of situation. But the fact of the matter is every piece of data that we can have, we try and build into our decision-making process. I'm gonna get to this real quick. Let this quote sink in. My assistant went on to run his own baseball team. First advice, you can't read the papers, you can't listen to the radio show. Every town has talk radio, and it's just noise, noise, noise. And if you don't think that affects your decision-making, you're kidding yourself. So my advice to Paul, you gotta turn it off. So Paul goes and runs his own baseball team. Trade deadline is July 31st in baseball. Paul had access to the same information that we had in Oakland, and he traded for two 20-year-olds whose trend line was going up. The information suggested that at low cost, they were starting to trend line up in terms of their performance. And based on their age, it was only going to get better. And he had two 30-plus-year-olds who are making a lot of money who were starting to trend line down. Trading for players is a little bit like trading for stock. You want to trade for future performance, not past performance. So he makes this trade. He obviously is the only one who had this information, and because they were popular players, it didn't go over real well in the town he was in. In fact, he called me 4 days after the trade, and he said, they're killing me on the radio, they're killing me in the newspapers, they're yelling at my wife in the grocery store. And that happens, trust me. I said, well, Paul, I said, understand. I told you, hey, number one, not to read that. And number two, that's actually the key to a great baseball trade. That is the key to a great baseball trade. And I was totally making it up as I went along to make him feel better. Fast forward like 5 months later, this quote was in our paper. We had averaged 94 wins a year for 5 years, but we traded two of the best pitchers of the game, not because they weren't good. It's just that they were starting to, there was a cost, and there was risk as they got older that we couldn't absorb. Those two pitchers were Tim Hudson and Mark Mulder. Again, marvelous all-star pitchers in a 48-hour period. So after we traded the second one, this was in the paper. In fact, my own wife, Tara, did a sit-up this morning that this quote was in the paper, or this opinion was in the paper. And she said, honey, did you really just trade Tim Hudson and Mark Mulder in the last 48 hours? And I said, yes, I did. And she goes, we're going to suck this year. Do you know that? Excuse my language. I'm just quoting her properly. So I want to show you the results of that real quick, and I want to actually finish up. This is a busy slide for this room. Once Paul left, we started to build a bigger analytics team. And again, all with using the data in our proprietary analytics. And we traded Mark Mulder. He was making $6.5 million, and that's exactly what he should have made based on his performance when he went to his new team. We traded for a young man in the minor leagues, Dan Herron. When you looked at his minor league statistics, translated, I say statistics, we weren't using statistics, but when you translated his minor league info to the major league level, it suggested he could pitch at nearly the same level, but the advantage to us would be doing it at the cost of a rookie. Dan, at 23, 24 years old, $6 million salary is what he should have earned, but only was paid $323 to the rookie, so there's a gap between performance and pay of $5.7 million. For us to compete against larger teams, we needed to essentially create a gap between performance and pay. If we could times that by 25, we could make up the difference between our payroll and the larger payrolls out there. The second year, any actuary will tell you that the longer a player stays on the field, particularly a pitcher, the more pitchers he has, the greater chance he has of getting injured. Unfortunately, Mark was injured, but he was locked into a salary at $7.75. Dan Herron, a younger player with less wear in his arm, continued to get better. In fact, performed at a level that suggested he should have made $8.8 million, but we only had to pay him $500,000. So in the space of 2 years, we were able to get nearly $16 million of performance for less than $1 million. Again, our goal was to create that gap, multiply it by 25 to make up the difference. I gotta get through this quick because I want to finish on one of the most important points. Again, this is the aggregates. Again, to remind us that this isn't all the major league teams. The Yankees, during my tenure as Zach's first year was 1998, spent $3.2 billion on players. I put Tampa Bay down there. Very similar organization, the A's, driven by analytics and objective decision making. Ironically, the owner of the team was a former Goldman Sachs partner, Stuart Sternberg. Go through these quickly. This has been the total wins during this time period. I think Doug took away 4 playoff wins. We've been in the playoffs 8 times, Doug. and this is the actual metric I would take it to my owner when I was negotiating my contract. What does each win cost us? And I'm going to actually finish up with actually the most important thing, not about the book and what we've done, really less or more so than what's happened on the field. Is you know, one of the things I sort of spent the last half hour talking about what we've done on the field. That's really not, I think, the impact of the book and what the organization has done. I think the great thing about our use of data is it's created transparency in our business. Before we could rely upon making decisions and there was no accountability. Right? Data sort of gave accountability to our decision-making process. So the book comes out in 2003, and a lot of people read it. A lot of young people from not just the United States, but all over the world read it. Men, women, young girls, young boys read this book and realized I wasn't a professional athlete, but I love sports, and now I have an opportunity to work in sports. There's now an avenue. So the book comes out. Paul leaves to run his own team. And we're hiring a baseball operations assistant in Oakland, $30,000 a year. Doesn't even rent you a park bench in the Bay Area. We received 1,500 resumes for this one entry-level position. One of the young men who was interested emailed me. He said, "Can you wait till May to hire this position?" That's when I will be receiving my PhD in astrophysics from Oxford. It's a true story. He was an undergrad at Cornell, and he was getting a PhD. It's like a made-up PhD. Like there's like rocket scientists, but he was an astrophysics PhD. I politely told him he was overqualified. That being said, the two finalists for the position. Number 2 was a young man who had graduated from Yale as an applied math major, and he was in the middle of the actuarial exams when the job was posted. We almost hired him. The young man we did hire came from a Pakistani family. He grew up in the Philippines. His dad worked for the Asian Development Bank. He was actually a Canadian citizen. He followed American sports on the internet, loved the Chicago Bulls, and he loved the quantitative side of baseball. His first time in the States, full-time, was when he was an MIT student, where he majored in behavioral economics. When the job was posted, he was in the process of working on his PhD at Cal Berkeley in behavioral economics, and much to his mother's chagrin, we hired him. The young man's name is Farhan Zaidi. 2 years ago, Farhan Zaidi was hired by one of the biggest sports franchises on the globe, the Los Angeles Dodgers, to be the general manager. So the impact of the book isn't what we've done in the field, it's that people like Farhan are in this business now, making it a better business, and has the opportunity, despite the fact that he didn't even grow up playing baseball in the United States and running one of the biggest teams in the